In today's episode, the 1974 Porsche 914. Hello and welcome back to Course Light, your car brochure channel, where we look at car brochures from around the world for the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s here on YouTube. So have a look at the episode. Please do consider subscribing. It is all completely free. It really helps you keep in touch with the channel, and we've got over 600 episodes now, even though we're only a very tiny niche channel. Anyway, I've always said about Course Light and the brochures on Course Light, we look at the ordinary car. For me personally, I think I've gone from being like a kid who always loved the supercars, Ferraris, etc. as a kid. The older I get, the more I appreciate the ordinary car, and I think I no longer have dreams about supercars. I have dreams about very ordinary cars, because for me, that's where your memories lie, in those very ordinary cars. And we've all got tales of cars that we had or our relatives had in 70s, 80s and 90s, which is really why I tend to concentrate on those years. Well, today we're looking at a Porsche. You could argue this is no longer an ordinary car, but really the Porsche 914 was a very ordinary Porsche really at the time. Today's brochure is actually from North America and is from 1974. So let's have a look at that now. So here is today's brochure, the Porsche 914, and as it says on the front cover, 1974. Don't worry, we will zoom in on in there in a moment. Well, the Porsche 914 is actually, I know it's a weird thing to say, it's one of my favourite Porsches, because I always liked the design and how it was going for, well, to be quite an ordinary car really. So this is kind of like a joint venture between Volkswagen and Porsche. And you could argue, some people call the nicest Porsches Volkswagens for whatever reason, because they've always had that tie, of course. And of course, Porsche initially developed the Volkswagen Beetle, the most well-known of all the Volkswagens. Well, why do we call this the Volkswagen Porsche? Well, like I said, this was a bit of a joint venture between Volkswagen and Porsche. So this is more, Volkswagen and Porsche coming together rather than just being an offhand comment, of course. So why did they do this? Well, they found both Volkswagen and Porsche both needed new models. Porsche wanted to replace the ever-aging entry-level Porsche 912. Volkswagen wanted to replace its range-topping sports car, the Volkswagen Type 34 Common Gear. So they both had joint interests. So Volkswagen looking at it from, I want this top-of-the-range car, and Porsche looking at it saying, I want a new entry-level car. So quite an interesting story of them coming together to actually develop this. I think initially the idea was you were going to have a Volkswagen version with a flat 4, and then you was having a Porsche which had the flat 6. But I think that kind of like died a little bit, because here in North America, we're talking about North America because this is a North American brochure, it was deemed to be too risky a strategy for the American market. Watering down the Porsche name, I don't think it was ever seen as a good thing, because if you was walking into a Porsche dealer, that's where you would have wanted to find the car, and it seemed more exclusive, I guess. So they decided that both versions in North America were going to be named the Porsche 914. Now this brochure actually only shows flat 4s, but I think they did flat 6s as well. Anyway, I don't want to waffle too much. Let's zoom in on the main image. So don't adjust your sets. It is a little bit blurry anyway, because car brochures like to do cars moving along at speed. Personally, I'd rather have them still so I can look at them in more detail, but I've zoomed in right at the front there. Weird little North American reflector there, kind of like spoils the lines. But like I say, this was always my favourite Porsche in the 70s, which is weird because obviously you should be dreaming about 911s, but I thought this was such an unusual design, particularly at the rear here. And that tail light as it swoops away. I always like them. I don't know why. I think my memories of these, and really for me, cars are all about memories, are not of seeing someone driving one of these. It was actually a Top Trumps card I had. Remember Top Trumps, where you compared engine sizes and top speeds, and you see if you can collect all the cards, and if you was fortunate enough to have in your hand a Ferrari, then the chances are you was going to win. But these were in the Top Trumps card as being Volkswagen Porsche, and I think that intrigued me as a young boy. But I also really liked the design of it. There's something a little bit different about it. In fact, there was one of these for sale quite recently here in Canada, and I was tempted. It was in rough shape, but I was tempted. Fortunately, my sense came back to me. And then there's the title, the Porsche 914 1974, or for those who prefer, of course, the Porsche 914 from 1974. Anyway, let's have a look inside. So there it is in all its loveliness. Very bizarre from the front end, I thought, particularly with the lights down because it had pop-up headlights. Very unusual design. I don't know why they came up with this design, because you could argue it's a little bit ugly, but I do like it somehow. We'll start with the text though, and we'll come back to these lovely images. By telling us one thing we've learned to expect from racing is the unexpected. Mile after grueling mile can tell you a lot about how well a car handles, or how badly. For instance, after years of racing mid-engine Porsches, we've learned that an engine in the middle makes a car extremely manoeuvrable. Lets you corner easily, decelerate evenly, so we put a lot of what we've learnt at the track into a mid-engine Porsche for the street, the 914. Strange thing to actually write in a Porsche brochure, that, isn't it? Because most Porsches, of course, would have been known, and still are, as being a rear engine design. Rear engine design isn't really the perfect design for a sports car. Porsche very cleverly make it work, and here they're saying, well, actually it's not ideal to put it in the back, we'll put it in the middle on our base model. So that's an unusual thing to say. I think they're almost admitting the more Porsches are actually set up not ideally. It goes on to tell us, but beyond its many track features, the thing you'll probably like most about the 914 is that it is just plain fun to drive. For one thing, it's very peppy. It goes from 0 to 60 in 11 seconds. That doesn't seem great, does it? But this is 1974, of course, but it's not. I don't think it was ever meant to be like a rocket ship, of course, because this was your base model Porsche. Cruises all day at autobahn speeds. It's lightweight, air-cooled engine, can boil over or freeze up. It comes with a 5-speed gearbox, electronic fuel injection, rack and pinion steering, 4-wheel independent suspension, and disc brakes on all 4 wheels. So for the time period, that was a nice setup actually. Taking the fun along is easy because the 914 has 2 trunks. Together there's a total of 15 cubic feet of space, and to let in the sun, a removable fiberglass roof that stores in the back trunk, just in case. We built our 2-seater in the classic sports car tradition, but a departure from 2-seater tradition is in fact that you don't need a shoehorn to wedge yourself in and out. For the comfort from every angle, the 914 has seats that slide back and forth and tilt to 4 positions. There's a padded dash with large tachometer, and the steering wheel has a turn signal switch, horn, high beam control and windshield washer wiper switch right on it. Up till now, we've been talking about a 914 with a 2-litre engine, and you've seen that it has a lot going for it. However, there are some people who don't require quite so much power. So for them, we built the same 914 with a 1.8 litre engine. Notice how they're spelling litre. Yeah, this is a North American brochure. So yes, two engines. They're both flat fours, but we can get a 1.8 or a 2 litre. They're trying to gloss over the 1.8 really and saying, oh, how fantastic the 2 litre is, and then coming back and saying, well, there's a cheaper one. Impressed with our mid-engine Porsches? You'll be even more impressed when you see one in action. Come into our showroom and pick out a 914. Get inside, give it every kind of test, including one for the road. So there we go, a lovely image to start with in yellow. It looks really good in yellow, and you probably, the regulars will notice, I'm always saying it's a lovely car in yellow. I think I'm just a little bit sad and bitter that you can't really get interesting colours now on cars. 27 shades of grey, a white, a black. If you're lucky, there might be a red and or a blue. But so nice to see actual nice bright colours. We've got so depressing, haven't we, in the modern times. Anyway, you'll also notice in the background there is a little Volkswagen bus. And maybe a little bit of a nod to Volkswagen for saying, yes, okay, you can just badge this as a Porsche for North America. Unusual style at the front though, is it? You can't get away from the weird looks. These little sort of fin type things they almost look like it's travelling the wrong way. You almost think that's the rear of the car. Certainly with the headlamps down like that, it does give an unusual profile, doesn't it? But I like it all the more for that for some reason. Next image, a bit more of a moody sunset shot. Interesting wheels. I don't think I would ever say, oh, if I found those wheels, I don't think I would say, well, they're Porsche wheels. They're a little bit unusual, aren't they? Also nice, isn't it, to see that we've got a bit of a quarter light on there. Moving down, we see it here with the top up, so we've got two boots essentially. It's saying that's a fantastic thing, but all you end up is with a little bit of a boot at the back and something you can hardly get anything in. I'd be surprised if he's going to get all that in the boot, or the front boot of this 914. He's trying to put a really big suitcase in the back by the looks of it, and a little bit of a hand luggage in, sorry, a huge suitcase. I'm trying to look at this basically. He's got a huge suitcase he's trying to get in here. He's got a small suitcase he's trying to get in here. Is he optimistic, or was there that much space in it? And then at the rear, the lady's putting all the small stuff in there. You think they need to swap sides. Anyway, yeah, it's an unusual design. I enjoy the look of that rear boot section being so big. Unusual to see that on this style of car. It looks like you access the engine through there as well by the looks of it. It's hard to see from that shot, but remember, it is a mid-engine car. Usually you have a separate little panel to open up to get to the engine, because obviously limited access. Maybe you had to remove the boot. I'm not sure. I'm not that familiar with these cars. I've never actually owned one, so maybe you can tell me if that is true. And then we look at the interior in this very, very 70s shot. Sorry, it went a little bit blurry there, but try to clear that. Look out for a 70s shot and 70s clothes, and look at that immaculate hair this gentleman has. Lovely looking seats though. Of course, it reminds me a little bit of Fiat X19 sort of vibe, because of course, same idea, mid-engine. So yeah, interesting looking car all round, I find. And there we have it, parked next to a green example as well. Equally like it in this green as well. Really nod to Volkswagen really, because Volkswagen colours were just as good as these. They had some really vivid colours in the 70s. Like I say, I'm just a little bit bitter we can't get these lovely colours on cars today, but I don't mind, because it makes me want the older cars more than the new cars, just another reason. Very spindly wipers. Unusual sort of parking position. I don't know if they've got an unusual wiping pattern, but they look very spindly and look like they're at an unusual angle. They've certainly not tried to hide those wipers at all, have they? They're just there. I don't think Hubnup's ever actually tested a Porsche 914 or a Volkswagen Porsche, has he? Maybe you would enjoy those wiper pattern. Incidentally, those who don't know, you should check out Hubnut. It's a very interesting car channel. It's my favourite, actually. I just always like watching Hubnut. I don't know why. The guy there is just a really nice guy, and you know, he has a go at everything, so I always find him very interesting. But he's obsessed with wiper blades, is why I'm kind of like mentioning it there. But yeah, a lovely little angle to see the Volkswagen Porsche at a different angle, isn't it? And really appreciates this sort of vast area at the back, which, like I say, is probably because it shares the engine space and the actual boot itself in that area. And then the last picture, or should I say two last pictures here, are quite interesting. We've got all the dials next to the gear lever, so like the lower dash and the fascia itself. Looking at this sort of lower dash area with the gear lever on there, the gear lever looks at a very unusual angle, doesn't it? That's interesting. Then we've got a clock, a temperature gauge, and what's that down at the bottom? Is that an oil pressure gauge maybe? And then further dials in there. Interestingly, the main sort of dial that you're actually looking at is the revs rather than your speed. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? I guess to really push you and get every last bit of power from the engine. Oh no, it's not an oil pressure gauge at all. Look, it's your volt meter. And then if I just tilt the camera to one side on this main image, you can just about make out where we can see those gauges on this left-hand drive US spec vehicle. Little Porsche badge in the centre there. But yeah, I quite like the interior setup actually. So yeah, only a quick little brochure, so we turn the page and we're onto the back page and the specs, or how it describes it here, the Porsche 914 technical data 1974. So we'll look at the technical specs and then we'll come back to this lovely little drawing here, a bit of an x-ray sort of cutaway shot. It was quite a cute little picture, so we'll end on that one, but we'll have a look at the specs. So it starts at the top here with the engine. So it's telling you it's a 4-cylinder engine, tells you about the bore and stroke, then tells you the displacement is a 1795cc engine on the smaller engine as well. Also tells you the compression ratio. Maximum torque is 94 foot-pounds at 3400 RPM. It's quite low RPM actually. And then the 2-litre version, again 4-cylinder engine on this one, 1971 cc's, and this has got 105 foot-pounds at 3500 RPM. So it's then looking at the chassis and suspension. So at the front they've both got wishbones and shock absorber struts, and at the rear suspension is semi-trailing arms. And the brakes, 4-wheel disc brakes all round on both versions. It's then got some electrical notes there, so it's got an alternator which is a 700 watt, 12 volt, 45 amp hour, and then the battery is battery and coil. Below that it talks about the wheels and tyres, both using a steel wheel. And below that still it's talking about dimensions. I'm not going to go through all the dimensions, but of course you can pause this screen at any time if you want to look at more details there. And then finally we've got the performance, so that's interesting to show the performance. You often see more performance figures on 70s brochures, which is always nice. So the smaller engine, the 1.8, is doing a top speed of 107 miles per hour compared to 115 miles per hour for the 2-litre. 0 to 60 time, I believe it's 0 to 60, usually are, aren't they? Oh, it's 0 to 62, okay. Is 14 seconds for the 1.8, 11 seconds for the 2-litre. Really the 2-litre was the model to get, wasn't it? And then if I just shift the camera down, I'm just going to move it slightly, so just be warned of that. We've also got at the bottom there the fuel consumption, average fuel consumption. It's 19.5 US miles per gallon, which of course is different than the UK. For the 1.8, and then 19.5, exactly the same for the 2 litre. It then talks about the optional equipment, which is actually for both the 2 engine size models. So really there isn't really much difference between the 1.8 and 2 litre apart from the engine, really, isn't it? They're kind of like equal spec levels by the looks of it. So optional equipment: appearance group, we can get a steering wheel and leverette cover, center console with clock, oil temperature gauge and voltmeter. Looks like that was optional equipment. That's interesting. So it was probably quite stripped out in base form. We've got a leather boot for shift lever, dual tone horn, fog lamps in bumpers. I'm surprised. It is saying optional though, isn't it? I'm not reading that wrong. I'm surprised they are optional equipment. And then for the performance options, we can get a pressure cast alloy wheel, which is nice to see in the 70s, front and rear stabilizer bars and a front spoiler. It goes on to tell us in some cases the cars pictured in the catalogue have been equipped with items which are optional or not available in the United States. Your local authorised Porsche Audi dealer will be glad to show you the latest list of standard equipment for this market, as well as all of the available options. Design and equipment specifications are subject to change without notice. So that then takes us to this nice cutaway image, and I guess we'll see the engine and see where that lies on this model. We'll start at the front though. I always loved these diagrams. I've often thought of, they would look good on sort of like a framed poster, wouldn't they? These really talented artists, particularly when you look at like the 60s and 50s artists, they were incredible. That's not quite as good as those artists, but it's still a lovely image, isn't it? Shows you where the spur wheel lies on there as well, and of course the suspension unit and the sort of steering geometry. Interesting. Then gives you the layout of the seats. And also I've just noticed that it's kind of like colour coordinated, isn't it? So you can follow the suspension down there and see how that lies. That's really nicely done. See a bit of a quarter light moving down. Okay, so really the trunk area is just the trunk area according to that. The engine is further than that under this sort of roll bar section, so I'm not sure how you access it. Interesting. But again, shows you like the suspension in green, which is nice to see, etc. So yeah, an interesting layout for sure. So yeah, just to confirm, I've just zoomed back to that very first image on the front cover. You can actually see that panel now, can't you, from this angle, where the roll bar is. If I can get a pen on there, where that roll bar is, that's going to be a panel to remove to get to the engine. Looks like it interestingly says Porsche on there as well, so kind of like reminds me of a Fiat X19 when you've got this little separate panel to open by the looks of it, although particularly with that roll bar in there as well, it's be quite difficult to get in there to actually work on, I would assume. Anyway, let's go back to where we was up to. We've got a little bit of a code there for the brochure by the looks of it, 103421, printed in Germany. Oh, and I mustn't miss this out, because these artists never really get any sort of a shout out. Very rarely are they signed on the 60s brochures, and they are really talented people. This guy has signed it SW, so thank you SW, that is a lovely image of that Porsche. So they've got an interesting brochure there for the Porsche 914, or Volkswagen Porsche as I like to call them. Of course back then the relationship was different, so it was nice to see those companies coming together. Now of course Volkswagen owns Porsche, I think that was around about 2012, correct me if I'm wrong. But back then it was nice to see those companies coming together and saying, we want this, Porsche, I want a base model sports car, Volkswagen, I want a top of the range car for my sporty department. And then they came together But yeah, an interesting story and an interesting car. Like I said, this is one of my favourite Porsches, hence why I've included it in Quarterlight. And I'm going to argue this is an ordinary Porsche, if such a thing exists. But thank you so much for watching today. Please let me know your memories of these cars, if of course you have any. You may not, but like I said, thank you for watching. We'll end as we always do by saying, please do consider subscribing. It is all completely free. You'll not be charged for being a subscriber at all, so don't worry about hitting that subscribe button. Keeps you in touch with the channel, supports the channel, and lets you know when future episodes arrive if you hit that little bell button. You can also become a member as well. Look at the homepage for that. I don't want to push membership, but it's just a little bit of a mention there. It's very cheap if you do want to support the channel further. We'll end with a couple of little boxes there for other episodes you may be interested in. There's over 600 episodes now, so thank you for those who continue watching. Don't forget to give a thumbs up if you like this brochure and video. We'll see you very soon in a future video. All the best, take care, and goodbye.